The land stretched far and wide, kissed by the golden glow of the twin suns that had watched over the kingdom for centuries. Rolling fields of millet and maize swayed gently in the warm breeze, their golden tops shimmering like waves of light. The rivers ran deep and strong, carrying life to every corner of the vast kingdom, their waters clear enough to reflect the heavens above. The people of this land lived in abundance, their laughter mingling with the songs of birds that danced upon the morning winds. Elders often gathered beneath the great baobab tree at the heart of the village, their voices steady and wise as they recounted the tale of the two sons. Long ago, an elder would begin, his weathered hands tracing patterns in the dust. There was only one sun in the sky, but when the ancestors saw the great destiny of our land, they placed a second sun above us so that our paths would never be darkened and our prosperity would never fade. The children would listen with wide eyes, clutching their knees as they sat in the dust, their minds painting visions of the ancestors shaping the sky. Among the many rulers of this blessed land, none was as beloved or as feared as King Adisa. His presence alone could silence a room, his deep voice commanding both respect and unease. The people praised his wisdom, for under his rule the kingdom flourished. Trade routes stretched beyond the mountains, warriors stood strong against enemies, and the laws were just, swift, and absolute. Yet, behind the mask of power, there was something else, something unseen but felt. The king's eyes, a village woman whispered as she pounded yams in a wooden mortar. They are sharp, but they do not shine. An elder beside her nodded gravely. He carries the weight of something unspoken. In the palace, only one man dared to confront the truth. Old Seer Barrow, whose eyes had long seen beyond the veil of the living, had watched Adisa grow from a reckless warrior into a mighty king. But he also knew what others did not. Adisa's victories had come at a price. "A storm is coming," Barrow murmured one night as he stood before the king. His voice was soft, but his words cut through the air like a blade. "You have built a throne of stone, but the roots beneath it are weak." King Adisa's jaw tightened. "The kingdom stands strong, old one. What storm do you see?" Barrow stepped closer, his frail hand gripping the king's arm. "The past does not stay buried, Adisa. The ancestors whisper, and I hear them." The king turned away, his hands clenched into fists. The past. It was always there, lurking in the shadows of his thoughts, waiting for the night to fall when his mind was unguarded. Many years ago, when Adisa was still a young warrior, the kingdom had teetered on the edge of ruin. Plague swept through the land, claiming lives in the hundreds. Crops withered under an unforgiving sun, leaving the people to starve. Enemies circled like vultures, waiting for the kingdom to crumble. Desperate, Adisa had sought power beyond mortal reach. He had entered the forbidden forest alone, stepping between twisted trees whose branches clawed at the sky. The air had been thick with silence, no wind, no birdsong, only the sound of his own breath. Then, from the darkness, it had come. The Nyoka. A great serpent, its golden scales gleaming even in the absence of light. Its eyes, twin orbs of molten amber, had locked onto him, unblinking, knowing. The spirit's voice had slithered into his mind like smoke. Power. That is what you seek, warrior of men. Power to make your enemies kneel, to turn famine into feast, to rule beyond your years. Adisa had swallowed his fear. Yes, the serpent coiled around him, its body as cold as death, its whisper like a song of doom. "Then give me your firstborn, and I shall make you great." For a moment, Adisa had hesitated. His heart had pounded like the war drums of his people, but the kingdom was dying. His people needed a savior, and the child, he had not even been born. "I accept." The moment the words left his lips, the forest had erupted into a storm of whispers. Shadows moved, unseen figures laughing, mourning, watching. The pact was sealed, and as Adisa had walked out of that cursed place, the sky had opened and rain had fallen for the first time in a year. Seasons passed, and the kingdom flourished. The people called him a hero, a ruler blessed by the ancestors. None knew of the bargain he had made in the darkness. Then, years later, Queen Zala bore him a son, Prince Juba. The people rejoiced, their voices rising in songs that echoed across the land. Drums thundered, griots sang, dancers moved like spirits possessed by joy. "The heir has been born," they cried. "The kingdom will never fall." But as the people feasted, the king stood alone, watching the flickering flames of the celebration. His heart did not dance with joy, it clenched with fear. For he knew, the Nyoka does not forget. That night the palace lay in silence, save for the distant echoes of dying embers from the celebration fires. In the royal chamber, the queen slept soundly, exhausted from childbirth. In the crib beside her, the infant prince lay peaceful, his tiny chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. But King Adisa did not sleep. He stood by the window, his hands trembling as he gripped the stone railing. The air felt wrong, too still, too thick. He could feel it. Then, from the darkness, came the whisper. "So, the boy has been born." The words did not come from a mouth. They curled through the air, wrapping around the king's throat like unseen hands. A shadow rippled across the walls, slithering like a serpent unseen. "You did not think I would forget, did you?" Adisa turned sharply, his breath caught in his throat. The torches flickered. The air grew colder, and in the darkness of his chamber, the weight of his past slithered ever closer. The stars hung low in the sky, watching in silent judgment as King Adisa paced the stone floor of his chamber. His heart pounded with the weight of a decision no father should ever have to make. The whisper of the Nyoka spirit had faded, but its presence still coiled around him, unseen but ever near. He had bargained with darkness, and now the debt had come due. His son, his firstborn, would be taken, unless he found another way. The door creaked open, and old Seer Barrow stepped in, his gnarled staff tapping against the cold floor. His eyes, clouded with age but sharp with wisdom, studied the king's tormented face. "You cannot fight the spirit, Adisa," Barrow murmured, his voice steady. "But you can outwit it." The king turned to him, desperation flickering in his eyes. "How?" Barrow exhaled slowly, as if carrying the weight of 1,000 ancestors on his breath. "The boy must die, at least that is what the spirit must believe." The words struck Adisa like a blow, but he understood. To save his son, he must let him go. That night, under the cover of darkness, a trusted warrior carried the swaddled prince beyond the palace walls. The child stirred but did not cry, as if the ancestors themselves soothed him. The journey was long, winding through hidden paths and whispering trees, until at last they reached the quiet village of Ikenna. There, in a hut woven from reeds and thyme, Mama Ngeri waited. The old seer, wrapped in robes of deep indigo, peered down at the child with knowing eyes. "He is strong," she murmured, gently running a wrinkled hand over the boy's forehead. "He will live." The warrior hesitated before placing the child in her arms. "The king asks only one thing," he said. "Keep him safe. Let him never know who he truly is." Mama Ngeri nodded, her face unreadable. A child who does not know his name cannot be hunted by fate. Far away, in the great palace of the two sons, Queen Zala wept. The healers whispered among themselves, shaking their heads. "The fever has taken the prince," they told the people. "The gods have reclaimed him." The kingdom mourned. The drums of sorrow echoed through the hills. But only King Adisa knew the truth, that his son lived, though he would never again call him father. Years passed, and in the quiet village of Ikenna, a boy grew into a young man. He was called Juba, though he did not know the weight of that name. He ran through the fields with the other village boys, his laughter loud, his step swift. He was strong, his arms built from carrying baskets of yams, his skin bronzed by the sun. Mama Ngeri watched him closely, her old heart swelling with pride and dread. He was different from the others, his mind sharp, his spirit restless. The village elders often murmured among themselves, shaking their heads. "The boy carries something in his blood," one said. "A destiny greater than this village," another whispered. But none dared speak the truth. And so Juba grew, unaware that beyond the hills a king watched over him from the shadows, never daring to step too close. Back in the palace, another heart burned with unrest. Prince Okoro, the king's younger brother, sat beneath the great pillars of the throne room, his fingers tapping against the hilt of his dagger. The years had stretched on, and yet his brother had not named an heir. The throne sat heavy, but soon it would need a successor. And who better than him? The king hides something, Okoro muttered to himself. He had seen it, the way Adisa would disappear into the night, the way his gaze would drift toward the horizon as if searching for something lost. One evening, as he lingered near the palace corridors, the soft murmur of voices caught his ear. "Prince, hidden away." Okoro stilled, his breath catching in his throat. He pressed himself against the cool stone wall, listening. The child was never truly lost. His mind raced. Could it be? Had Adisa deceived them all? A slow smile curled his lips. If the king had a son, then Okoro had a problem. But problems could be solved. That night he slipped away from the palace, his path leading him toward the darkened forest where few dared to tread. The air grew thick, heavy with unseen eyes. The trees whispered secrets, their leaves rustling, though there was no wind. Then, from the shadows, a voice. "You seek something, do you not?" The Nyoka spirit slithered into view, its golden scales gleaming like stolen sunlight. Its eyes, deep and knowing, locked onto Okoro. The prince swallowed his fear. "I seek the truth," he said, "and power." The spirit's laughter was a hiss against the air. "A secret exposed is a throne lost." Okoro's lips curled. "Then tell me the secret, and in return, I will give you what you desire." The spirit coiled around him, its voice a breath against his ear. "The king has lied. The prince lives." A sharp intake of breath, a heartbeat of silence. Then a grin stretched across Okoro's face. The kingdom had been deceived, but not for much longer. By the time he returned to the palace, his plan had already begun to take shape. He moved through the corridors like a shadow, his whispers curling into ears that had long been hungry for doubt. "The king has betrayed us," he murmured to the elders. "Why has he not named an heir?" he asked the warriors. "The gods are displeased," he told the priests. Like a slow-moving tide, the whispers spread. Doubt took root, and in the grand halls where Adisa's name had once been spoken with reverence, murmurs of betrayal slithered like snakes through the cracks. The storm was coming, and this time, even the king might not escape its wrath. Silence swallowed the royal court as the truth unfurled like a dark cloud over the kingdom. Whispers turned into murmurs, murmurs into shouts. Shock and betrayal rippled through the air. The people who once bowed before their king with unwavering faith now questioned his every word. "Our king has deceived the gods," someone cried. Elders clutched their prayer beads, their faces lined with disbelief. In the center of it all, King Adisa stood, his shoulders weighed down by the burden of his own choices. He drew a deep breath, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, it is true." Gasps spread through the crowd like wildfire. An elder stepped forward, his voice laced with fury. "A king must protect his people, not bring doom upon them." The court erupted into chaos. Some demanded Adisa's immediate removal. Others hesitated, fearing that angering the gods further would bring even worse consequences. But before a decision could be made, a chill swept through the palace. The flames of the torches trembled, shadows stretched unnaturally against the walls, and the air grew thick, heavy with something unseen, yet suffocating. Then a voice came, a sound that was both a whisper and a roar. A promise was made. The voice hissed, slithering through the air like an unseen predator. The massive doors of the palace creaked open, though no hand had touched them. And then it appeared. A shimmering, golden-scaled form slithered into the court, its eyes burning with ancient power. Nyoka, the spirit bound by blood and deceit, had come to collect its due. "Adisa!" The spirit's voice coiled around the king like a serpent. "A debt must always be paid." Terror seized the people. Some fell to their knees. Others clenched their eyes shut, whispering prayers that no longer carried any weight. "Give me the prince," Nyoka commanded, its voice curling with both hunger and certainty. "Or your lands will turn to dust, your rivers will dry, and your people will wither away." King Adisa's fists clenched, his face etched with regret. His silence was an admission of guilt, and in that moment, all knew there was no escape from what was coming. And then, a single voice rose above the terrified whispers. "Father," a young man called, stepping forward from the shadows. His voice was steady, but his heart pounded like the beating of war drums. "Tell me the truth. Who am I?" The court held its breath. Juba, the hidden prince, now stood before the king, demanding answers that had been denied to him his entire life. Adisa turned to his son, his eyes hollow with shame. "You are my son," he whispered, his voice breaking. "But before you took your first breath, you were promised." Nyoka's lips curled into a cold, knowing smile. "Yes," it whispered, its golden scales rippling with delight. "You belong to me." The weight of destiny settled upon Juba's shoulders, but he did not falter. He straightened his spine, his resolve hardening. "If my death will save this land," he said, his voice unwavering, "then take me." A wail rose from the people, cries of despair, grief, and helplessness. A prince hidden away for so long, now walking willingly into doom. But before Juba could take another step, a voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "Enough!" The room stilled. All eyes turned to the queen, who had stood silent all this time. But now she stepped forward, her presence commanding, her eyes alight with something fierce and ancient. She raised her hands and spoke a name, one long forgotten, one that no mortal dared to utter. The sound of it cracked through the air like thunder. Nyoka recoiled, its body twisted violently, its golden scales darkening as an unseen force bound it. "No!" it shrieked, writhing as invisible chains coiled around it. "You cannot do this!" But the queen stood unmoved. "You have no power here," she declared, her voice steady and unshaken. For she was not just a queen. She was the last of the sacred protectors, the only bloodline capable of breaking dark pacts. With one final, ear-splitting screech, Nyoka was wrenched from the world, banished into the void forever. A stunned silence followed. The air, once heavy with dread, now felt eerily light. But though the spirit was gone, the kingdom's troubles were not over. Slowly, all eyes turned to King Adisa. He had made the pact. He had invited darkness into their land. He had betrayed their trust. An elder stepped forward, his gaze firm. A king who bargains with shadows cannot sit upon the throne. The words carried finality, and Adisa did not resist. He reached up, his fingers brushing against his crown one last time before letting it slip from his grasp. As he turned away, his voice was barely above a whisper. A king is only as strong as the truth he upholds. And with that, he walked out of the palace, disappearing into the night. Behind him, the doors closed, sealing the end of his reign. The Nyoka spirit had been vanquished, its foul presence driven back into the abyss from which it came. The winds that had once carried the wails of the tormented now blew softly over the kingdom, whispering through the trees as though sighing in relief. Yet, even as the land breathed once more, an uneasy silence lingered in the air. The villagers had gathered in the palace courtyard, their faces marked with the weight of betrayal, their eyes fixed on the throne where King Adisa stood. The elders formed a solemn circle, their staffs planted firmly into the earth. Their presence was heavy, like storm clouds gathering before the first crack of thunder. Though the spirit was gone, its shadow had left a deep scar upon the kingdom. The people did not cheer, nor did they rejoice. Victory had come, but it had demanded a price, and now the time had come to decide what must be done. One of the oldest elders stepped forward, his voice measured and firm. The darkness did not come upon us unbidden, he said. It was welcomed, bargained with, and given power. His words cut through the stillness like a blade. The people shifted uncomfortably, their gazes flickering toward the king. Adisa did not flinch. He stood, shoulders heavy with the burden he had carried for years. He had made a choice long ago, one he had believed would save his son, his people, his kingdom. But the cost had been greater than he ever imagined. And now it was time to pay. The verdict was swift. The council's decision could not be contested. A ruler who dines with darkness cannot lead the light, another elder declared, slamming his staff against the earth with finality. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The words hung in the air, heavier than the crown upon Adisa's head. His fingers traced the golden band for a moment, feeling its weight, not just of metal, but of the years it had spent upon his brow. The years of ruling, of sacrifice, of deception. Slowly, without resistance, he removed it. The light of the setting sun caught the crown as he held it in his hands, as if reluctant to release the past. Then, with steady hands, he turned and faced his son. Prince Juba, the boy he had hidden, the man he had long watched from the shadows, now stood before the throne. His hands, calloused from the years of work among the villagers, clenched at his sides. His heart pounded, for though he had always felt the stirrings of destiny within him, he had never imagined this moment. The elders deliberated, speaking in hushed voices among themselves. The people murmured, their uncertainty crackling through the air. A prince raised in the ways of common folk. Was he fit to rule? Finally, the head elder stepped forward, raising a wrinkled hand for silence. A ruler must not only be born of royal blood, he said, his voice carrying across the courtyard, but of a pure heart. Juba bowed his head, kneeling upon the sacred ground where kings before him had stood. I swear upon the spirits of my ancestors, he vowed, to rule with honesty, with wisdom, and to never repeat the mistakes of the past. The elder nodded, satisfied. He lifted the crown, no longer burdened by the sins of the father, and placed it upon Juba's head. Rise, he commanded. Rise, King Juba, ruler of this land. A chant began, soft at first, then swelling like the roar of the river after the rains. Juba! 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 The new king stood tall, though his heart still carried the weight of all that had come before. But as he looked upon the people, he knew this was his destiny. Not far from the celebration, Prince Okoro stood in the shadows, his face was twisted with bitterness, his fists clenched. The throne should have been his. The crown should have rested upon his brow. And yet he had nothing. His ambitions, his years of scheming, had turned to dust. He barely heard the elders' voices as they called him forward. His feet felt heavy as he approached, his heart hammering in his chest. He had always feared this moment, yet some part of him had believed he would escape it. But the elders' judgment was absolute. For your deceit, for your treachery, for your hunger that nearly destroyed us all, an elder declared, you shall be cast into exile. Never shall your shadow darken these lands again. Okoro's jaw tightened, his gaze flickering to his brother, the new king. He had stolen his place, stolen his fate. But Juba only watched him with a silence that was worse than anger, worse than condemnation. A throne won by deceit will crumble beneath its own weight, another elder warned. And with those words, Okoro was led away, his footsteps dragging, upon the earth that would never welcome him again. At the heart of the village, before the sacred tree where the ancestors whispered their wisdom, the council gathered once more. A decree was spoken, one that would shape the future of the kingdom forever. No ruler shall ever forge secret pacts with spirits again. The lesson of Adisa's downfall would not be forgotten. It would be carved in stone, told from generation to generation. The storytellers began their work that very night, their voices weaving the tale that would outlive them all. A kingdom that had once trembled on the edge of darkness would now stand as a beacon of truth. As Adisa stepped away from the palace for the last time, he turned at the gates, looking upon the home he had lost. He did not weep, nor did he plead for mercy. He had made his choices, and now he would live with them. He lifted his chin, whispering, words that carried with the wind. A king is only as strong as the truth he upholds. And with slow, deliberate steps, he disappeared into the horizon. A fallen king, a lesson for history. Upon the royal balcony, the new king, Juba, stood before his people. His voice was steady, filled with the weight of his new responsibility. This land shall never again be ruled by fear, he declared. The people, weary yet hopeful, bowed before their new ruler. And so, under the reign of King Juba, the kingdom began anew. Even the thickest forest cannot hide the sun forever. No matter how deep a secret is buried, the earth will one day push it to the surface. King Adisa believed that power could shield his truth, that the whispers of the ancestors would never reach the ears of the living. But the truth is like a restless spirit. It will always find its way home. The people had trusted him, looking to him as the pillar of their land, the voice of wisdom, the guardian of their peace. Yet behind the golden walls of the palace, behind the heavy drapes of his throne room, he had made a pact with darkness. A forbidden secret, a hidden prince, a bargain struck with forces not of this world. He thought he could control the tide of fate. But fate does not bargain. Fate does not forget. The whispers had started as murmurs among the elders, then grew into uneasy questions among the warriors, and finally a storm of truth that the wind carried to every ear in the kingdom. And when the people heard, their faith turned to doubt, their love to anger. Secrets are like shadows. They never stay where you leave them. They stretch, they shift, and in the end, they always betray the one who tries to keep them. Power taken without honor is like water held in a broken calabash. It will slip through your fingers no matter how tightly you grip it. King Adisa's throne had been built upon deception, and like a house of sand, it had crumbled beneath the weight of its own falsehoods. Prince Okoro, the son who had burned with ambition, had learned this lesson in the most painful way. He had reached too far, grasping for power that was never meant to be his. He had lied, schemed, and betrayed, believing that strength alone could make him king. But the ancestors see beyond the veil of power. They weigh the heart, not the hand that wields the staff. And in the end, his own greed had devoured him. He stood before the elders, no longer the proud prince, but a man stripped of all he had fought for. The throne was beyond his reach. The people had turned away, and the land itself had rejected him. A throne won by deceit will crumble beneath its own weight, and those who chase greatness without virtue will find only emptiness at the journey's end. A true leader does not hide from the storm. He faces it, stands firm, and lets the wind test his strength. Juba, the son raised in the humility of the village, had never sought a crown, yet it had found him. He did not claim his right through force, nor did he demand loyalty through fear. Instead, he stood before the people with nothing but his truth. A king is not made by the blood in his veins, the elders had said, but by the honor in his heart. And so Juba ruled not with the weight of secrets, but with the strength of wisdom. He was not the son raised in a palace, but he was the king the people had longed for. He did not inherit his father's mistakes. Instead, he carried the burden of ensuring they were never repeated. And so, the tale of King Adisa and the Nyoka spirit would never fade. Long after the dust of their time had settled, long after Juba's reign had passed into history, the story would live on. Around the village fires, elders would whisper to their children, "Let this be a lesson to all who crave power beyond their means." The kingdom had learned its lesson, but the story would remain. A warning, a guide, a truth, etched in time.